Episode 11 of Apothecary Diaries has got my mind swimming. It's great because at least Mao Mao is on the same page I am with this idea of swapping the children, but it seems like it has tried to at least sway my theories on Mao Mao being one of those two children. Yes, despite the fact they claim that there's two boys, I'm thinking that Mao Mao was one of them and it was actually a daughter. They were just kind of covering it up. Again, the whole thing is still the question of why. And again, I think this episode really confirms a lot of things, but at the same time, sort of putting a little bit of a wrench in it to at least make me believe that maybe Mao Mao wasn't involved with that, even though Mao Mao herself is confirming that a swapping happened. But yes, fantastic episode, really, really emotional, especially the ending. The ending had me tear-eyed with Li Xu running out there. I was like, no, girl, why did Li Xu have to show up? Why couldn't they have said their goodbyes the day before and then I didn't have to see it? But no, they had to show Li Xu running out there and just in tears. Literally Li Xu losing her mother. It's like she's been removed from her family before, but now it's like she loses this one person that she kind of signifies as her mother. And it's just, it was too heartbreaking, way too heartbreaking, but yeah, let's just jump right in this episode, jumping right into the meeting between Mao Mao and Fengming, which was, yes, very, very tension building. Like the entire time, Fengming is just sitting there with like this stone face, and I'm like, this is the face of a murderer. This is the face of a future attempted murderer. Yeah, that was not a good situation there, but yes, Mao Mao confronting Fengming and basically laying out her theory on what happened. Now, there's bits and pieces of it within it that I think are a bit questionable. Like, I kind of wish there was a little bit more, I guess, details put into it as to how she came to that conclusion. But yes, the conclusion is based on the conversation that Mao Mao had with Li Xu that unfortunately we don't get to see, which I'm kind of wondering if it was probably in the novel. She came to the conclusion that yes, way back here when they had the birth of Otto's child, that was the point in which something happened. And yeah, it shows it later on, but essentially the two children were being born at the same time. The previous Empress Dowager, their child being born, and Otto having her child. I hate the fact that Fengming was kind of pointing out the idea that Mao Mao's father was useless and that he did something terrible, and it's like, no. It's obvious that when you have these two are giving birth at the same time, this one takes priority, unfortunately. And so yeah, he was drugged off to the current Empress Dowager and had to take care of that child. And as a result, unfortunately, and I think that Mao Mao's kind of coming to the conclusion, maybe based on some of the documentation that she looks at, that Odo had a very rough birth, and because of that, pretty much lost her ability to ever have children again. But it gets worse in the idea that, yes, this is where we find out where the honey connects to everything, which is, I think, connects all the pieces together, which I completely didn't think this is the direction I was going to go. Like, my theory in the previous episodes was that Fengming knew who Li Xu was, and that's why she was trying to get rid of her. No, she legit didn't know this honey was poisonous. And she gave it to Otto's child, and eventually the child died. This is where it gets in that area of, like, really unfortunate, the idea that she didn't know that that was the case. That she didn't know this was poisoning the child. But still, even still, there still has to be a punishment. It's obvious for the last 16 years, she's kind of been suffering this whole time because she adores Otto. And she wants to do everything and serve her for the rest of her life. She respects her greatly. And she took this one thing from her. This person that she treasures so much, she took that one thing from her. And so she's been haunted by it. She's been punished by this for years. But yeah, there's still the aspect that she didn't say anything when she finally found out. By all accounts, yes, she should have come clean the moment that she found out from Li Xu that she essentially killed that child. They just assumed that it was just one of the many things that can happen to a child when they're in their early ages. Even Otto herself saying, don't blame yourself. But again, the thing still remains that she's the one that did it. And yes, eventually she's confronted by Li Xu. Hey! That's like the most unfortunate thing. Li Xu just comes in there and she's like, oh yeah, by the way, when I was a little baby, I got sick from honey. They said never eat it again. They just knew that it made her extremely ill, and so they stopped giving her honey. Well, that's because, yes, this particular honey is poisonous to infants. Adults, like they kind of point out later, adults, like that whole scene, as the flower and she eats on it. Oh, that's sweet. It's poisonous, by the way. It's not lethal, though. To a child, it's lethal. And she finds that out from Li Xu, and that connects it in her mind. Oh, crap. I killed this child. It was my fault. And she didn't want Otto to find that out. So she did everything in her power to get rid of Li Xu. Get her out of here. Until eventually, yes, the previous emperor dies and she leaves, but eventually she comes back. I can see, like, I just have like this mental image of like Feng Ming sitting there going, holy crap, why do these emperors keep bringing in this little child? What is with these emperors and their fascination with this little girl? You perverted freaks. But no, Li Shu finally shows up again and she has had it. I need to protect this and I need to protect her position, so I need to get rid of her. And that's what all leads up to the poisoning, unfortunately. And I think that's where I personally don't feel bad. Like, there is an element in the story, like a lot of these stories, where it's like, but they didn't know. So is this punishment really necessary? Like, I think up until this point, before she started poisoning Li Shu, it's hard to say that she should be put to death. Because again, she didn't know. But there's the argument to be made that she should have known. If you're a caretaker of essentially the up-and-coming prince's child, you should know. And thus, yeah, you having that recklessness, having that unknown, isn't an excuse. But obviously the point in which she starts to poison Li Shu, and inadvertently nearly poisons Yoku instead, yes, I can't excuse it anymore. That's the point in which it's no doubt she has to be executed for that. She, in effect, nearly murdered 2 of the concubines of the emperor. It's super sad. It is kind of one of those very tragic stories that kind of snowballs on itself. Feng Ming's story is where it just snowballs. I loved Odo. She is so great. I am so impressed by her. She's so much better than me. I will devote my life to her. She had a child. She loves this child. I'm going to take care of this child. I'm going to give it this medicine that's going to make it grow strong and grow healthy. And then it dies. Why did it die? Then eventually finding out, oh, I did it. I got to make sure that she doesn't find out because she can never have a child again. So heartbreaking, she can't find out about this. And it snowballs into her literally trying to get rid of that thing that's going to reveal it. And it all culminates to this point in which Mama finally comes up and says, I know what you did. And everything around her falls apart. But Mama still gives her the option. And I think that's a lot to do with the fact that she sort of feels bad for her because, in a sense, I think Mama recognizes that she loved her and wanted to take care of her. And it all kind of snowballed. Giving her the option, essentially, to, yes, still rang out the fact that she did something extremely wrong. I think in the end, Mama gives her the option of at least not having to reveal what happened to the child. That's what she ultimately comes to. You're going to reveal the fact that you tried to poison Li Shu, but you're not going to reveal the fact that you killed that child. That's what she's given her the clear for. She can keep that secret and take it to her grave. Mama and her essentially taking it to the grave. Now, if Mama reveals it later on, that's a completely different story. But for now, it's taken to her grave to protect Otto. And that's sort of what they reveal later on when they have that conversation with Otto. But yeah, it was a really high tension little scene here. And again, technically kind of opens the door to what kind of comes up later on. But I also got to kick out the fact that when she went back to her room, she's all tired and she's like, oh, I got to get changed first. And yeah, come to find out she had like this super wrapping underneath her body so that she could protect herself from slashings. Like she knew that was a possibility. Mama's not dumb. I like that idea. Like, is not showing that she has like this, plot armor. She's like, no, I wore armor because I knew there's a chance that I would not have plot armor. But yeah, this turns into the meeting with Jinji, and he's like, did you know? What did you know about this? She's confessed. What do you know? Oh, I didn't find anything. I don't know what you're talking about. Which I think is a part in the idea that she doesn't want to have more attention upon herself. Like, this is something that she doesn't want. But at the same time, it is kind of, yes, if she did reveal what she found out, she'd be revealing the secrets that they're technically keeping. But yeah, this is when we get into the scene with Otto, which I thought was, it was so fantastic. I think the pinnacle of this episode is for fact the scene on the wall, which, my gosh, all these people getting on the walls. Like, they're like pointing out that it's like this idea of like climbing up on this wall. Like, people shouldn't be getting on this wall by themselves, but it's like everybody keeps getting on this wall. But no, Mama gets up there. She points out the fact that, yes, Feng Ming was executed, and yes, Otto is leaving the next day. And of course, Otto shows up, which we've seen her in the previous episode up there drinking, so it made sense. I kind of assumed that was going to be the case, that yes, before she leaves the next day, she's going to come up there and drink with her, or at least come up there to drink and then run it into Mamao. But now this is where it gets really emotional. Otto showing up and pointing out that she's kind of masculine, and Mamao's like, yeah, I think you're giving off that impression. Which, yes, she points out that, yeah, after I lost my child, I became friends with the emperor rather than a concubine. And they kind of point out this before in this idea that technically Ado and the emperor, the current emperor, were kind of like siblings-in-law. And she's pointing out that, yes, she was kind of assigned the role to become a concubine for him, but she never wanted that. So after losing the child, she kind of became his friend again, which that would make sense as to what Fengmin was talking about, and the idea that they walked equal. That's something that's not normal. I mean, back here when Fengmin's talking about it, from her perspective, it's just a case of Ado is just a very strong-willed person, and she's brave enough to stand and talk equally with the emperor. But what was actually happening there was that they became friends again. So yes, she's going to talk to him equally because they're friends. This is kind of a rare person that the emperor has sort of allowed to talk to him like that. This is his friend. But this is where we get into the question mark area, because right after this, she says, I don't know why I clung to that title for so long. I lost the ability to have children way back here. I no longer was a concubine to the emperor. The assumption is that he was visiting her to just hang out and talk. This is my friend. I want to hang out with my friend. And that kind of leads into the idea of her having this kind of masculine persona. Like she has become this like buddy with the emperor, just another one of the bros. But she never gave up the title of concubine. She probably could have left a long time ago, but they're implying here that she stayed there. Of course, my theory in that is what we're going to get into in a minute, is that she wanted to stay with her son, that her son wasn't actually dead. But before we get into that, yes, she stands up and points out that the water below them was really cold. It must have been really cold for her servant that jumped from that wall into her death. She was such an idiot for doing that. And we're all idiots. And it's kind of interesting because Mama kind of points out, yeah, she's kind of agreeing with her every time she says, she was stupid. We're all stupid. We all make stupid decisions. And then she goes to leave. And that's when Mama points out that, yeah, I think for sure that this servant actually did in her own life. Ado noticed it. And what she's kind of making the assumption here is that there's a possibility that that servant, in order to cover up what happened with the poisoning, jumped to her death. It was sort of to pull that suspicion away from Ado. Like they seen that Ado was possibly going to be marked as being at fault for the poisoning Lishu. So like I mentioned before, my assumption was that Fengmin probably killed her in order to cover it up. Mama's realizing that it's sort of the same thing here. Her death was to pull away that suspicion, but what Mama's saying here is that she chose to be a part of it. That's the part that's new here. That Mamo is thinking that this girl that died did it willingly. That possibly Fengmin worked with her to get that placed upon her. It could have been the idea that that girl was feeling guilty and jumped to her death, and then Fengmin used the opportunity to cover it up. Like she was going to end her life, and she used that opportunity to cover up for her. And additionally, she's pointing out the idea that yes, Fengmin is dying to keep the secret of the child away from her as well. Everybody is dying to protect Ado, which is super tragic. And again, I think right here, she's pointing out that I think Ado notices it. I think Ado knows that girl jumped to her death in order to protect her. I think Ado knows that Fengmin died to protect something else. They're all foolish. We're all foolish. And it kind of turns this kind of tragic thing because that's right after her saying literally that she hates the idea that she clung to this place for so long. She knows this place is kind of nasty. It's super... Ado's story is so freaking tragic. It's like it goes from it's like back here, she was friends of the emperor. Eventually, she's kind of forced in the position of being a concubine. Doesn't seem like she wanted it. I mean, it's like having a good friend and then being forced to have to basically sleep with them all the time. And then having this moment where you're giving birth, which had to be, I can't even imagine how painful that was. They're implying that she lost her uterus in that whole process. Like, this isn't like a modern day hospital. It's not like she jumps into this whole system and they plug her into the suit and it gives her like painkillers and everything. She literally felt all that. Like, put aside just the pain of childbirth, but then having something catastrophic like that happen at the same time, and there's nothing to relieve the pain but maybe alcohol. And then losing the child, and then again becoming his friend, and then just spending the rest of your life stuck in there. And yeah, possibly, what we kind of allude to in a minute, Jinshi, her son, always being there, but she can't be with him. Which, yes, gets into the theories as Momo comes down and then falls on a Jinshi, and he grabs onto her and won't let her go. She wanted to thank him for a minute, but then he starts crying. What he says is that, yes, I went to someone's place and drank with them, and my host left. And then a little bit later came back and kicked me out. Yes, obviously, and I mean, they show briefly who it is, which is technically Ado. I think he was with Ado to spend the last night that she's there before she leaves. And I think the reason why they were visiting, and this is the big question mark, because what they're implying is that obviously Jinshi's upset. He's crying while he's holding on to Mao Mao. He's showing this weakened side of himself to Mao Mao. He is hurting. Now, yes, there's a theory that Jinshi just loved Ado and didn't want her to leave, but the obvious thing here, if they're implying, and even Mao Mao theorizes it later, this is my mother, and he knows that it's his mother, and his mother is about to leave. He's about to possibly never be able to see his mother for a very long time. She's leaving the palace. And additionally, it could be possibly that he is hurting for her. He knows that Ado is hurting and that she's leaving the palace and that she's going to be away from him. So obviously this is upsetting him a lot. But I know, again, it's all depending on until eventually, if they do confirm that Jinshi is Ado's son. But yeah, this cuts to the parting scene where Ado walks up and hands over her crown over to Jinshi, the crown that will then go to the next concubine. Which I guess this kind of kicks out my theory on the idea that the emperor can have as many concubines as he wants. Yes, technically these are high concubines. I mean, he can have as many concubines as he wants, but these are like the four that, go to the garden palace parties and everything like that. So I guess it makes sense as to why they would have sort of a replacement system in play. But yes, the emperor had been already setting up to have, Ado leave. And that seems to be because he wanted to, I guess, send her off so she doesn't have to be there anymore. I think he may have implied, based on the idea that she's saying, why did I cling on to this title for so long? I didn't want to, like, almost as if she didn't want to be there because she can't serve her duty. Maybe the stress to it and everything like that was getting to her. But it seems like there's a mutual understanding here that the emperor wanted her to leave and she didn't want to be there. So she'll give up that crown, leave the palace, go to this other, disconnected palace, and then they can bring in another concubine, one that can actually serve that role. But yes, this is the point in which Mao Mao, it all clicks for Mao Mao. The two of them standing next by each other. Man, that's right. I knew she looked like somebody. She looks like Jinshi. If they swapped outfits... Wait. Swap. What if they swap the babies? So yes, it already is. She's going down that rabbit hole. She's like, yeah, technically that makes sense. If the two of them had children and something happened, they swapped the bodies, and then one of them, which would technically be the Empress Dowager's son at the time, yes, if something happened to one of those babies, that makes sense why my father was physically injured and kicked out. It all makes sense. It's all starting to click in her head that, yes, there could have been a swap here, and because they look the same, it makes sense. But then she says, no, that's a dumb idea. Complete nonsense. An idiotic delusion. What a dumb story. Moving on. It's like one of those ones where you question, like, is she saying that because she doesn't want to even think about it because of how much, like, absolutely insane stuff can come from that? Like, yeah, I just thought of, like, the most catastrophic thing that if this came to light, people gonna die. And they possibly gonna go hunt down my dad. Things are gonna go down if this gets out. I'm gonna act like that was the stupidest story and never think of it again. I don't want to get involved in any of that, so I'm gonna go, wow, no, they don't look the same. Their hair color is kind of different. I mean, it definitely couldn't be them. It is kind of, and again, that kind of goes back to my thing I was mentioning earlier, like, bam, confirm my theory right there, bam. But again, my continuation from that theory that I had last episode was that one of those two children, essentially the Empress Dowager's daughter, was Mao Mao. And at some point, Jinshi, the son of Ado, was given to the Empress Dowager, and that he's kind of pretty much a prince. But the continuation of that theory is that the daughter had to come back over here, and then, yeah, possibly died. But it seems like in this episode, they're pretty much laying out that that child that Ado had with her, that Fengming was taking care of, died. Unless we find out later that it was getting really ill, and then, again, Mao Mao's father took him into possession and was nursing it back to health, or possibly they thought the baby was dead, tossed it out, and then he found the baby and then nursed it back to health after he got exiled. All those are a possibility there. But the very last scene in this episode throws a massive wrench in that, because I don't know that it does, but it's making me question it a lot, because this very last scene, we have Gonshun's walking up and saying, okay, Fengming, I looked into who was all connected to Fengming's family. Here they are. And bam, one of those placards says Mao Mao. And I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? I mean, it can still all tie together. Don't get me wrong. It can all still tie together, but right here, it's sort of implying this idea that, they mentioned before that Feng Ming's family is extremely powerful. It's a very powerful family. She was from a very powerful family, and that's why she was assigned in there to take that role. And that's what was getting in my theories and the idea of her being a part of a powerful family out here that possibly knew Li Shu and wanted to get rid of Li Shu as a part of that family. That was my theory on why she was poisoning Li Shu. Again, we find out this episode that's because Li Shu was trying to reveal that, they had this honey and everything, that she had this story about her childhood and didn't want to get that story to Ado because they had such a bond and she would eventually tell that story. But that was my theory there. But now it's sort of implying that there's some sort of connection there. And that could get into, outside families or noble families or high-ranking nobles or whatever that could be eventually led into Mao Mao. But in which way? That's the big massive question mark. Now, what could sort of still save my theory on still Mao Mao being from the inner palace and everything like that, and there's that connection not really necessarily being that big of a deal, is that Jinshi is specifically saying, I thought her story was that she got kidnapped and brought in here. But, ... We'll have to wait till next episode. But I guess my theory there is the possibility, the connection that Mao Mao has to Feng Ming's family is that Feng Ming's family is involved with the kidnapping of Mao Mao and being sold off into there. Which that could tie into some crazier other things, and the idea that maybe somebody disconnected with Feng Ming herself is trying to get Mao Mao back into that palace to reveal something. I don't know. That seems like a bit of a stretch, but we'll see. Really, really crazy stuff, though. But yeah, great episode. Yeah, there's this scene with Li Shi running out there. I thought that was great because Mao Mao was pointing out the fact that, yeah, all of her other servants are just kind of, they're going yawn. There's a bunch of people on the sideline that some of them are laughing. And then you have that one, the lady in waiting that is the poison tester rushing after Li Shu. It was like, oh, how freaking sweet. Mao Mao's kind of pointing out the idea that she has that one lady in waiting. It's so nice that probably comforting that she now finally has at least one lady in waiting that is looking out for her. The other lady in waiting, they should be stopping Li Shu because she's making essentially a fool of herself. She's rushing out there during this ceremony of her leaving. They should be stopping her. No, this will look bad. Stop, Li Shu. This is a ceremony. She needs to leave. It's going to look crazy. Everybody seeing you, bawling your eyes out, running out there. It's not very ladylike. But no, that one lady in waiting. She has that one that's looking out for her. But yes, her running up there and just collapsing or falling and then seeing her face. Mama pointing out the fact that she turned from her usual masculine looking self to the face of a mother. And I was like, oh gosh, it hit like a punch in the stomach. That was a lot of tear jerking right there. It was a super beautiful scene, and it's so tragic because I think the entirety of this episode is sort of highlighting something we've been seeing with Li Shu for a long time. The idea that Li Shu's always isolated. She's always by herself. And yes, they've kind of pointed out the idea that her lady in waiting are kind of creating that isolation, putting her in that isolated state. But as this episode shows, in some cases, she found people to talk to. She went out of her way and met the other concubines, which the main one being Ado. Then at some point, unfortunately, she was pushed out. She was isolated away from her. She wasn't allowed to see her. The lady in waiting for Ado, Feng Ming, was keeping her away. And it's super tragic because, yeah, as Mao Mao puts it, this is a girl who, age of 9, I think they said? The age of 9, she was brought to the rear palace for the previous emperor to be a concubine there. The emperor died, she was sent out again, and then she was brought back in. This is a girl that was taken away from her family, taken away from her parents. And on the opposite end, here's Ado, somebody that had a child, can never have a child again, lost their child, and now this little child is in front of her, and they just create a codependency. The two of them need each other. I need this daughter. I need this mother. And they loved each other. They were so close. But Ado never knew, maybe possibly knew, and just maybe didn't do enough, that her lady in waiting was pushing her away. It again explains the idea of why Li Shu was even coming to that pavilion, because it seemed like she was terrified to be there. And again, that was because of Feng Ming. She was coming there because she wanted so badly to see her mother. And now she's lost her mother. It's just super heartbreaking. So I feel so bad for Li Shu. This is a tragic story. I mean, Ado was a tragic story, and yes, Lu Hua was a tragic story. They're all tragic stories, but I'm still holding on my theory that Mao Mao is the Emperor Dowager's daughter, and it was just swapped, and then ill and then brought out, but we'll see. We'll see. Because I think the question mark still remains, even after Mao Mao sort of made that connection, is why? Again, the question mark still remains. I said that in the last episode impressions. I say it this time again. The question mark is why? Why did they swap them? Is it simply somebody made a oops and they were in the same... Like, this isn't a hospital where you have this room and the two babies are sitting there and they went, oop, I picked up the wrong one. It could be, since you had one doctor and they were essentially taking care of two newborn children, and maybe they have them in the same place and they went oops or whatever, but somebody would have figured it out. It just doesn't make any sense that they wouldn't figure that out. It was either intentional for a reason, or the Emperor Dowager's child died and they need to put a placement in there. They couldn't have the Emperor Dowager's child, while the previous emperor is still alive, have that child be taken away. Because that is literally a prince. Yeah, granted, they're both princes, but to the current reigning emperor. But anyhow, that's my long thoughts on episode 11 of Apothecary Diaries. Hope you guys enjoyed this video as always. If you did, make sure that like button down below, comment, let me know what you thought of the episode. As per usual, I'm not looking for answers to this stuff. I'm just having fun speculating. We don't need answers. Let me have that theory and that mystery still there. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button to get my content on news, reviews, first impressions, top lists. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more and you like this content, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate everybody does. Y'all take care.